Every summer, you go out to your tomato plants and you do the math in your head. You've got 6 plants, maybe 8, spread across a big section of your garden. And by the end of the season, you have pulled maybe 10 to 15 pounds off each one. Some good fruit, some cracked, some that never ripened, some that rotted on the ground. You end up with a decent pile of tomatoes. But when you think about the space, the water, the time, it never quite feels like enough. Now, here is a moment I will never forget. About 11 years ago, I was at my Amish neighbor Daniel's place in late August, and he was weighing his tomato harvest on an old hanging scale by the barn. He had just finished picking from one single plant, and that scale read just under 80 pounds. I looked at the plant he had picked from. It was growing on a single stake, one stem going straight up about 7 feet, with clusters of big ripe tomatoes hanging every few inches from about a foot off the ground, all the way to the top. No sprawl, no cage, no jungle of leaves, just one clean, productive stem loaded with fruit. I asked him how that was possible, and he said something that stuck with me. Most people let the plant decide what to do with its energy. We decide for it. That is the core of what I am going to show you today. 5 things the Amish do to their tomato plants that push production to a level most of us did not know was possible. We're going to walk through each one, and by the end, you will understand exactly how the math adds up to 60, 70, even 80 pounds from a single plant. And stick around to the end, because I'm going to show you a simple Amish deep watering trick using something you probably have in your recycling bin right now. It uses less water than what most of us do, but it builds a root system twice as deep. Now, I want to be straight with you about where I started. For over 20 years, I grew tomatoes the way most Americans do. I would dig a hole, drop in a transplant, put a cage around it, water it when I remembered, and hope for the best. My plants would grow into big, bushy green monsters that looked impressive, but produced maybe 10 to 15 pounds of actual usable fruit each. Half the tomatoes were small, a lot of them cracked after heavy rain, and every August I was fighting blight because the foliage was so thick and close to the ground that moisture just sat in there. I thought that was normal. I thought that was just what tomatoes did. It was not until I started paying attention to what Daniel did differently that I realized my plants were not underperforming. They were just undermanaged. Every bit of potential was there. I was just letting it scatter instead of focusing it. So let me show you how to focus it, starting with what goes into the ground before the plant ever does. The first step is preparing the planting site. And when I say preparing, I do not mean just digging a hole and dropping in some. The Amish treat each tomato planting spot like it is the most important 2 square feet in the garden. And when you are asking a single plant to produce 60 to 80 pounds of fruit over a growing season, that soil has to deliver nutrition non-stop for 4 to 5 months without running out. Here is how Daniel set up each planting site, and this is what I've been doing for the last 9 years, about 4 to 6 weeks before your last expected frost. Or in the fall before, if you are really planning ahead, dig out a hole about 12 inches wide and 12 inches deep. Set the soil you removed to the side. Into the bottom of that hole, add 3 to 4 generous handfuls of finished compost, the dark, crumbly kind that smells like earth, not like the pile is still cooking. Add 1 to 2 handfuls of well-aged manure, horse or cow, aged at least 6 months. Add 1 tablespoon of bone meal for slow-release phosphorus, which supports root development and fruit production. And add 1 tablespoon of crushed dried eggshells for calcium, which helps prevent blossom end rot later in the season. Mix all of that together at the bottom of the hole with your hands, then mix the native soil you set aside with another handful or 2 of compost and use that to fill in around your transplant when you plant. Now, here's a detail most people skip. When you set your transplant, bury it deep, really deep. Strip off the lower 2/3 of the leaves and bury the stem all the way up to the top cluster of leaves. Tomatoes are one of the few plants that will grow roots along any part of the stem that is underground. By burying deep, you are giving the plant a root system that is 2 to 3 times larger than it would have been if you planted it at the same depth it was in the pot. That bigger root system is what allows the plant to take up enough water and nutrients to sustain 80 pounds of fruit production. Daniel buried his transplant so deep that sometimes only 4 or 5 inches of the plant were above the soil line. It looked like he was burying them alive, but within 2 weeks, those plants exploded with growth because the underground root system was massive. After planting, mulch around the base with 3 to 4 inches of straw, leaving a 2-inch gap around the stem to prevent moisture from sitting against it. That mulch keeps the soil moist, cool, and biologically active all season long. This planting site preparation takes about 10 minutes per plant. It costs almost nothing if you are making your own compost and saving eggshells over the winter. And it is the foundation that everything else builds on. But the soil is only half the equation. What you do above ground is where the real difference shows up. And that starts with the most important and most counterintuitive step in the entire system. The second step is single leader pruning. And this is the heart of the Amish method. It is also the step that most gardeners resist because it goes against every instinct you have. The first time I watched Daniel prune his tomatoes, I genuinely thought he was making a mistake. He walked down the row with a sharp pair of shears and removed what looked like half of each plant. Healthy green shoots, side branches, leaves, all cut away and dropped on the ground. I was standing there watching perfectly good growth pile up at his feet, and it took everything in me not to say something. But I had seen his harvest. I had watched him weigh 80 pounds off a single plant. So I kept my mouth shut and I watched. Here is what he was doing and why it worked. Indeterminate tomato plants, which are the varieties the Amish use for this method, naturally produce suckers. A sucker is a small shoot that grows out of the V-shaped joint where a side branch meets the main stem. If left alone, each sucker becomes a full new stem with its own branches, leaves, and eventually its own fruit. Sounds like more fruit, right? It is not. Here is the biology. Your tomato plant has a fixed amount of energy it can produce through photosynthesis on any given day. When you allow 10 or 15 suckers to grow into full stems, that energy gets divided among all of them. Each stem gets a fraction of the total. The result is a big, bushy plant with lots of small fruit that ripens slowly and unevenly because no single stem is getting enough energy to produce to its full potential. When you prune to a single leader, you remove every sucker and every competing stem. All of the plant's energy flows into one main stem. The fruit clusters on that stem get the full force of everything the plant produces. The tomatoes are bigger. They ripen faster. They ripen more evenly. And because you are not wasting energy on vegetative growth you do not need, the plant sets more fruit clusters over the course of the season than any single stem on an unpruned plant ever would. Here is exactly how to do it. Starting when your plant is about 12 to 18 inches tall, check it once a week. Look at every leaf axil, that V-shaped joint where a branch meets the main stem. When you see a small shoot forming there, that is a sucker. Pinch it off with your thumb and forefinger when it is 2 to 3 inches long. At that size, it snaps off cleanly and the wound heals within a day. If you miss one and it gets larger than 4 inches, use clean, sharp shears to cut it off rather than tearing, which can damage the main stem. Do this every single week from the time the plant is a foot tall until the end of the season. It takes about 5 minutes per plant. That is it. 5 minutes a week is the difference between 15 pounds and 60 pounds. Also remove all leaves below the lowest ripening fruit cluster as the season progresses. Those lower leaves are the oldest on the plant. They are the least efficient at photosynthesis, and they are the closest to the soil where blight spores splash up during rain. Removing them improves airflow at the base, reduces disease pressure dramatically, and redirects that energy upward where it is actually doing something productive. By midsummer, a properly pruned single-leader tomato plant looks almost startlingly bare compared to what most of us are used to. One stem, evenly spaced fruit clusters every 8 to 12 inches going up, an open canopy that light and air move through easily. It does not look like a tomato plant from a magazine. It looks like a production machine, and that is exactly what it is. Daniel used to say that pruning is not about taking away from the plant. It is about telling the plant where to spend what it has. That one shift in thinking from letting the plant choose to choosing for the plant is the single biggest reason his harvest dwarfed mine for all those years. Now, when you are pushing a single stem to produce this much fruit, you need serious support. That is the third step. Vertical staking. Forget wire cages entirely. A cage is designed for a plant the bushes outward in every direction. That is the opposite of what we are doing here. A single liter tomato plant loaded with fruit, growing 7 feet tall or more, needs a single sturdy stake that can handle the weight without bending or breaking. Use a hardwood stake or a piece of heavy-duty metal rebar, 7 to 8 feet tall above the soil line. That means your total stake length should be about 8 to 9 feet with 12 inches driven firmly into the ground for stability. Place it about 3 to 4 inches from the base of the plant at planting time. Do not wait until the plant is established and then try to drive a stake in, because you risk damaging the root system. As the plant grows, tie it to the stake every 8 to 10 inches using soft material. Old t-shirt strips cut into 1-inch wide bands are ideal. Garden twine works, but can cut into the stem under heavy fruit load. Never use wire or zip ties. The ties should be snug enough to hold the plant against the stake in a wind, but loose enough that the stem can still thicken naturally as it matures. Each tie should form a figure-8 pattern, looping once around the stake and once around the stem with a twist between them. This keeps the stem from rubbing directly against the stake, which can cause abrasion wounds that invite disease. By midsummer, a properly staked and pruned single liter plant will be carrying 20 or more fruit clusters up one vertical stem. The weight is substantial. I have had plants where the combined fruit load was well over 50 pounds hanging on one stem at various stages of ripening. A flimsy stake or weak ties will fail under that load. And when a stem that heavy falls over, it can snap and you lose everything above the break. Do not cut corners on the support. Daniel's stakes were thick hardwood posts, hand cut, and he reused them for years. He sank them deep and they never budge. That quiet overbuilding is very Amish. Make it strong the first time and you never think about it again. Now, what I have shared with you so far is a real piece of the puzzle, but it is still just one piece. If you want the complete system laid out day by day so you know exactly what to do and when, I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes a companion planting field guide so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. So click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. Or alternatively, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, you can take out your phone, open up your camera like you're going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. The 4th step is how you water, and this is where most of us are unknowingly limiting our plants every single day. The typical approach is to water a little bit every day, maybe with a hose, maybe with a sprinkler, getting the surface wet and moving on. It feels responsible. It looks like you're doing the right thing, but here is what is actually happening. Shallow, frequent watering trains the roots to stay near the surface where the moisture is. You end up with a plant that has a wide, shallow root system that dries out fast on hot days and cannot access the nutrients deeper in the soil where you put all that compost and bone meal. The plant gets stressed, the leaves wilt in the afternoon heat, and the fruit suffers. The Amish water differently. Daniel watered deeply and infrequently. Instead of a little bit every day, he gave each plant a slow, heavy soak 2 to 3 times per week during the production phase, delivering about 1 to 1.5 gallons per plant per session, right at the base, never on the leaves. He would set the water at a slow trickle and let it soak in over several minutes, rather than dumping it all at once and watching it run off the surface. Here is what that does. The water penetrates deep into the soil, 12 inches or more, and the roots follow it down. Within a few weeks, you have a root system that reaches deep into the enriched planting zone where all those nutrients are waiting. The plant becomes drought resistant because those deep roots access moisture that shallow-rooted plants cannot reach. On a hot August afternoon, when your neighbor's tomatoes are wilting, yours are standing upright with dark green leaves because their roots are pulling water from a foot underground where the soil is still cool and moist. During the first week after transplanting, water daily to help the plant establish. After that, switch to deep soaking 2 to 3 times per week. In the peak heat of summer, you may need to water every other day in zones 8 and 9, but the principle stays the same. Deep and slow at the base, never on the foliage. Wet leaves invite fungal disease, especially in the warm, humid conditions where tomatoes grow best. Watering at the base keeps the foliage dry and the soil biology happy. Daniel never once used a sprinkler on his tomatoes. He said it was like throwing money in the air and hoping some of it lands in your wallet. The 5th step is season-long management, and this is what separates a good year from a great one. The Amish do not plant and walk away. They manage each plant like a long-term project with a clear endpoint. You have already committed to weekly pruning and deep watering. The management piece adds 2 more practices that most home gardeners never think about. The first is consistent lower leaf removal throughout the season. As your plant grows taller and the lower fruit clusters ripen and get picked, remove the leaves below the lowest remaining fruit cluster. Keep moving that clean zone upward as the season progresses. By late summer, the bottom 2 to 3 feet of your plant should be a clean, bare stem with no leaves at all. All the foliage and all the production is happening in the upper canopy where airflow is best and light penetration is strongest. The second practice is topping about 6 to 8 weeks before your expected first fall frost. Cut off the growing tip at the very top of the main stem. This stops the plant from putting energy into new vegetative growth and new fruit clusters that will never have time to ripen before frost. Instead, all of the plant's remaining energy goes into ripening the fruit that is already on the vine. This is a hard one for a lot of people because you are cutting off what looks like a healthy, actively growing plant. But the fruit that sets in the last 6 weeks of the season almost never ripens in time anyway. You are just redirecting that wasted energy into the fruit you have already invested the whole season in growing. Daniel topped his plants every year in mid-August, which gave his remaining fruit a solid 6 to 8 weeks of focused ripening energy before the first frost in his zone. The result was that almost every tomato on the plant was fully ripe and picked before the season ended. Very little waste. Let me walk you through the math so you can see how this adds up. A well-managed indeterminate tomato plant pruned to a single leader can produce 20 to 30 fruit clusters over a full growing season. Each cluster sets 3 to 5 tomatoes. If you are growing a variety that produces medium to large fruit, averaging 6 to 8 ounces each, that comes out to roughly 100 to 150 tomatoes per plant. At 6 to 8 ounces each, that is 60 to 80 pounds from a single plant over the course of the season. My personal best from one plant was about 65 pounds. Daniel consistently hit the 75 to 80 range because his soil had decades of enrichment behind it, and his management was flawless. If you are in zones 7 through 9 with a long growing season, the higher end of that range is very realistic. In zones 5 and 6, 40 to 60 pounds is a strong target. In zone 4, 30 to 45 pounds is excellent given the shorter season. Now let me share some patterns I have noticed in conventional tomato growing and how the Amish approach handles things differently. The first pattern is letting every sucker grow because more stems looks like more production. What you actually get is a bush with dozens of competing stems, smaller fruit, slower ripening, and a dense canopy that traps moisture and breeds disease. The Amish remove every sucker every week without exception. The second pattern is using wire cages that support a sprawling bush shape. The cage encourages outward growth, keeps fruit close to the ground where it is vulnerable to rot and pests, and makes it nearly impossible to properly prune or inspect the plant. The Amish use a single stake that directs all growth upward and keeps every tomato visible and accessible. The third pattern is shallow daily watering that keeps roots near the surface. The plant looks watered, but it is actually water dependent and stress prone. The Amish water deeply and infrequently, building a root system that is self-sufficient between waterings and can access nutrients deep in the enriched soil. The fourth pattern is never topping the plant and losing weeks of energy to fruit that will never never ripen. The Amish top their plants at a specific date each year based on their frost timing and recover that energy for the fruit that matters. The fifth pattern is treating soil preparation as a one-time task rather than an annual investment. The Amish enrich each planting site every single season because they know that a plant producing 60 to 80 pounds of fruit draws enormous nutrition from the soil. That nutrition has to be replaced or next year's plant starts at a deficit. None of these conventional habits will ruin your garden, but together they cap your per plant production at a fraction of what is possible. The Amish approach simply removes those caps one at a time. Now here is the deep watering trick I promised you at the beginning. Take a 1-gallon plastic milk jug or juice bottle. Poke 4 to 5 small holes in the bottom using a nail or an awl. The holes should be just big enough to let water seep out slowly, about the size of a pencil tip. When you plant your tomato, bury this jug next to the base of the plant, with the top 2 inches of the jug sticking above the soil line. Leave the cap off. When it is time to water, fill the jug to the top with water. It will slowly seep out through those bottom holes over the next 30 to 45 minutes, delivering the water directly into the root zone at a pace the soil can absorb without any runoff. 1 full jug is roughly 1 gallon, which is a perfect deep watering dose for a single plant. You fill it, walk away, and the water goes exactly where it needs to go. Daniel did not use plastic jugs. He used clay pots with drainage holes, which is actually an ancient irrigation technique. But the milk jug version works just as well and costs nothing. I've been using these for about 7 years, and the difference in root depth compared to surface watering is remarkable. When I pulled up a spent plant at the end of last season, the roots had gone down well over 12 inches into the soil. That deep root system is what keeps the plant producing at full capacity even in the hottest weeks of August. Now, what I have shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it is still just one piece. If you want a garden that actually works with you instead of against you, I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold, and it includes the companion planting field guide so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. Second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you're going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. That is what I have learned from my Amish neighbors about pushing a single tomato plant to produce more than most people think is possible. I still picture Daniel standing by that old hanging scale grinning with 80 pounds of tomatoes from one plant sitting in a bushel basket at his feet. It took me years to get my own plants anywhere close to that, and I am still working on it. But the methods are simple, the science is sound, and the results speak for themselves. If any of this changed how you think about your tomatoes, I would love to hear about it in the comments. And if you have a technique or a variety that has worked well for you, share it. That is how we all get better. Thanks for spending time with me today, and I will see you in the next one.